Several hours later, the woman went to the meeting point, which was a camp. In this camp, there was her, a man carrying a sword, a man with a backpack, and another man sitting on a box. The bald man who was sitting on the box rested his elbow on his knee, started touching his head with the other hand, and began looking at the captain. He explained to her that this was too strange because they had been wandering around for quite some time and hadn't even seen a single level 5 or higher beast. The front line was supposed to have already been broken. The man with orange hair, who had his arms crossed, began to look at the bald man with a serious gaze and also added that he hadn't found any beasts either. The man with blue hair, who had his hands in his pants pockets, started looking towards them, and while a drop of sweat was falling from his cheek, he told them that this was true since it felt like a normal day in the desert. Not far from them, there was a mountain. He put his finger under his chin, started looking towards the mountain, and explained to them that one could even say that the desert was calmer. It was nothing like it was described in the reports. According to the reports, the front line had collapsed and the beasts were wreaking havoc. The woman with red hair, who had her arms crossed under her chest, began to look at the ground and thought that this was very strange. Several seconds later, she slightly lifted her head towards them, and while a drop of sweat was falling from her face, with a confused look she explained to them that in theory, a double level mission should not be like this. She came to the conclusion that if the beasts were not in the wild zone, then they could have hidden in the city. Not far from them there was a devastated and ruined city which had previously been invaded by the beasts. The captain, who had her arms crossed, began to look at them with a serious gaze and asked them to be careful, as if there really was a concentration of beasts in the city, then the density could be much higher than they were imagining. After saying this, she turned her back on them, started looking towards the city, and while one hand rested, she extended the other towards the sky and gave the order for others to follow her. Upon seeing her signal, the man with orange hair carrying a backpack and the bald man with a tattoo on his head began to follow her. The man with blue hair placed a hand on his sword and told the others that this was definitely going to be a good battle. Several hours later, they arrived at the old city, which was in ruins. The skyscrapers were destroyed. Everything was in chaos. Upon arrival, everyone became alert and started looking around. The bald man with a cigarette in his mouth took out the detector, turned it on, looked towards it, and calmly informed the others that the detector showed there were no dangers within 100 meters to the south. The man with blue hair, who had one hand on the sheath, grabbed the handle of the sword and slowly began to unsheath it. He started looking around, clenched his teeth tightly, and informed the others that there was no anomaly to the north either. The captain, who was standing next to him, clenched her fist tightly, started looking sideways, and with a serious look, explained to the others that this was very strange since the old city was more deserted than the plains. They hadn't encountered a single beast. For her, this didn't make sense. Upon hearing this, the man with blue hair stopped unsheathing his sword. With one hand holding the sheath, he turned his head towards her and fell silent, thinking that this was very strange. He began to worry and approached the captain. He asked her if it could be possible for the beasts to have moved to other defense lines. The captain began to look forward with a furious gaze, clenched her teeth tightly, and replied to him that she didn't believe this could have happened because if the beasts had really moved, their superiors would have ordered them to provide assistance elsewhere. At that moment, her smartwatch started ringing. She brought her hand close to her face, silently stared at the watch, and couldn't help but wonder what was happening and where the beasts were. She answered the call and someone explained to her that her team had done a good job cleaning the beasts so quickly. He also added that they had been in the wild area for half a day and hadn't even found a single beast. She approached the others, started touching her watch with her hand, and revealed to them that the Blue Star team had also arrived. They had just entered the wild area and were in the same situation as them. They couldn't see a single beast either. The three men approached her and stood silently, listening without interrupting. The man with blue hair began to look at her and with a firm gaze suggested the idea of going straight to the mouth of the cave, as perhaps this way they could see if there was any problem at a glance. The captain, who had her hand near her face and was looking at the clock, turned her head towards him and pondered the idea he had suggested. She started looking at him with a determined look and agreed. But first they were going to send a drone to take a look since it was very dangerous to go directly. They took out a military drone, which was equipped with high-precision cameras and a small machine gun. The man with blue hair grabbed the controller with both hands, looked up, and started controlling the drone. The captain simply crossed her arms, and she and the others began to look at the drone and remain silent. The drone started flying over a bridge. She asked him to get closer to the entrance of the cave, then lower its altitude and zoom in on the image. The man with blue hair listened to her and several minutes later, once the drone reached the entrance of the cave, His expression changed drastically. He started looking at the screen with a shocked look and couldn't help but be surprised and start sweating. The captain approached him, stared at him seriously, and asked if there was still no sign of beasts near the front. At that moment, someone shot the drone, causing it to explode into pieces and lose signal. Upon seeing this, they panicked and began wondering what was happening and why the drone had been shot down. Without hesitation for a second, everyone started running towards the entrance of the cave. While she was running, she told the others that it would be better to take a look for themselves to assess the situation. Upon hearing this, the others started following her and responded with an understood. The person who had brought down the drone was none other than Black Fox, one of the soldiers accompanying the old man. The old man picked up the broken drone, approached Black Fox, started looking at him with a furious gaze, and asked him with a shout why he had brought down all the reinforcement drones. Black Fox, who now had a robotic arm, began to hold the rifle with one hand, started touching his head with the mechanical arm, glanced sideways, started whistling, and explained to the old man that he had thought the drone was an eagle. He had planned to cook dinner for that guy. Not far from them was Tao, who had lit a fire with wood and was cooking. While he had one hand bandaged, he grabbed the ladle with the other, and while stirring the pot, he began to look at the old man and asked him not to worry because it didn't matter that Black Fox had shot down a drone since reinforcements were going to arrive soon anyway. Near them, there were a lot of corpses of mutant beasts lying on the ground. Another beast approached them, but Lu Sheng unsheathed his spear and effortlessly cut the beast in half. The old man and the Black Fox silently watched Lu Sheng. Tao turned his head to the side, started looking at him with a surprised look, and advised Black Fox to think about what to prepare for Lu Sheng's dinner later. While Lu Sheng's body was surrounded by a powerful red energy, and with one hand he was holding the spear, he placed his foot on top of the beast's corpse and began to stare at it intensely with an aggressive look. Upon seeing this, the old man couldn't help but be amazed and think that this was incredible. He also wanted to be as strong as Lu Sheng. At the same time, the captain and the others began to approach the entrance of the cave, which was surrounded by a strong red odor. While everyone was walking, she put a hand over her mouth and, upon smelling the strong scent of blood, asked the others to be careful. The rest were already accustomed to the smell of blood and were not as sensitive as the captain, so they simply kept walking. Several seconds later, upon seeing what was in front of the captain's eyes, she couldn't help but be shocked and start wondering what was happening. In front of them there was a mountain of mutant beast corpses, which were surrounded by golden energy. The snake-shaped corpse was a level 7 beast, and the dog-shaped corpse was a level 6 exotic beast. They began to look towards the corpses and couldn't help but wonder who had done all this. The captain dropped her arms to her sides, approached the corpses, started looking up with a fearful gaze, and upon seeing that all these corpses were high-level beasts, she began to tremble. At that moment, a noise was heard not far from them. She quickly turned her head to one side and with a determined look, began to wonder what was happening. Lu Sheng, who was holding the spear in one hand, grabbed the tail of a mutant beast with the other. He struck its body to the ground and started approaching the captain and the others. He got their attention and also asked if there was any problem. 3 minutes later, he took the captain and the others to a safe place. He cut off the head of a giant mutant beast, lit a fire, and placed it on top. After doing this, he sat on top of the truck's roof. The captain and the others remained silently watching Lu Sheng, wondering who this guy was. While he had one hand resting on the roof of the truck, he took out a thigh with the other hand, put his foot on the roof and started eating. He took a bite of the thigh, then looked to one side, and upon seeing the symbol of a tiger, he asked them if they belonged to the A-Class Star team and also if they had come as reinforcements. The captain placed her hand on her forehead, assumed a military stance, and gave the order to the others to salute. Upon hearing her command, the rest also began to salute. The captain started looking at Lu Sheng with a surprised expression and explained that they had received orders from high military command to come and eliminate the beasts. She also added that at least a dozen teams were on their way, and they were the first ones to arrive. While a drop of sweat was falling from her cheek, she looked away and started to gaze off to the side. Near them was the entrance to the cave, which was filled with corpses of mutant beasts. She began to look towards the cave, and upon seeing this scene, she thought that Lu Sheng was surely someone powerful at a high level. He was young and had a lot of power. She had never seen someone as outstanding as him at level 8. Lu Sheng got off the roof of the truck, put his hands in his pants pockets, started approaching them, and with a smile asked if the army would send someone soon to rebuild this. It turned out that these days, the old man and others cooked much better than cafeteria number 1182 regiments. The man with blue hair and the man with orange hair were somewhat surprised and confused at the same time. The captain put her arms behind her back, started looking at Lu Sheng with a serious look, and explained to him that first they should have waited for everyone to finish before speaking. But now, since she had informed the army, they would probably send someone after the review in 2 or 3 days. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng unsheathed his spear, gripping it tightly, and couldn't help but feel joy. At that moment, his body began to emit a powerful golden energy. He turned his head towards them and with a calm gaze, he told them that they could finally put an end to this. Upon seeing the powerful energy emanating from his body, the captain and the others were left speechless. She became nervous, approached him, started looking at him with a confused look, and asked what his rank was. While holding the spear with one hand, he began to look at her and remained silently lost in thought. He turned his back on them, slightly turned his head back, and with a murderous look introduced himself as the new recruit under General Yu Fei's command of the 1182 Regiment. He also added that he had been in the army for less than half a month. Upon hearing this, the captain went into shock. She was left speechless and asked him if he was joking. Lu Sheng slightly turned his body towards them and with a penetrating look, asked them if they thought he was joking. The captain and the others extended their hands to the sides and took several steps back. They couldn't believe that he was a new recruit. They were unable to believe that he had been in the army for less than a month and could hold an entire front line by himself. To them, he was truly terrifying. She approached Lu Sheng and calmly explained to him that she understood, and also asked if he wanted to come back with them to the headquarters. She had faith that with his ability, he would surely be easily evaluated as outstanding. She revealed to him that the benefits were much better than for a common soldier. Upon hearing this offer, Lu Sheng put his hand under his chin, began to look up at the sky, and after thinking, decided to replenish some spiritual essence and everything else. He took out his phone, grabbed it with his hand, slightly turned his head towards her and asked her to wait as he was going to report this to the commander. Upon hearing this, she clenched her fists, jumped for joy, started looking at Lu Sheng with a happy gaze, and thought that if he really was a rookie, this was the perfect moment to make connections with a powerful young man. Over time, she thought he could be the 8th star of the East. Several hours later, it got dark and they arrived at the military headquarters. Lu Sheng put the spear on his back, put his hands in his pants pockets, and started walking alongside them. The captain approached him and they began to converse. She turned her head towards him and with a joyful look informed him that this was the area for distinguished individuals, adding that many brought their families and friends here. The area where they were now was full of life. There were many mansions and it was like the city. Lu Sheng began to look towards the mansions and thought that this was very interesting. He could bring his parents here and not have to worry about the retaliation from that crazy Lion Su. He turned his head towards her and with a calm look, he asked her how he could get accommodation here. He would love to take a shower since he was all sticky. Upon hearing this, she started looking at Lu Sheng and remained silent. She began to blush and with a loving look, she explained to him that since he had never been in the headquarters before, technically he didn't have valid identification at the moment, which meant that for now he couldn't stay around here. She placed one hand under her chest, placed the other on top of her breasts, started looking into Lu Sheng's eyes and apologized to him. She also offered him to temporarily stay at her house tonight. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng turned as red as a tomato and couldn't help but wonder what was happening. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.